Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 108, and it's a very special issue. We are very excited to do another one of our creator interviews. We are speaking with the incredibly talented Phillip Kennedy Johnson. Phillip, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
It's my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So let's just jump right in then. I guess for those of our listeners unfamiliar with your work, I want you to just give us a quick synopsis of some of the things that you worked on and how you got started in writing. Like, what's your background?
Well, I started kind of as a way to help out my brother, who's an artist. He was just trying to get into the comics biz and didn't really know how to get going. And I'd always really enjoyed creative writing, hadn't done it in forever. So my day job is I'm a musician with one of the military bands in DC, and I was already in the service. And we kind of devised this plan for him to join the Army as an illustrator, get trained up in all the software that he needed, and then he'd have the GI Bill to go to art school. So he just moved in with me and just started getting in shape, and I helped him get ready for all the tests he needed to take. We were going to comic conventions, just kind of educating ourselves on how comics work, how the business works, met a lot of people. And then he joined like he planned to, and he started getting busy with other stuff. And I was having a great time writing for him and started looking for other artists to write for. And ultimately that became Last Sons of America, my first printed book with Boom Studios, which led to more books at Boom, like Warlords of Appalachia, some licensed things like Kong and Adventure Time and Planet of the Apes. And somewhere along the line, I got noticed by DC and Marvel and did an Aquaman annual. I did a short war story for Marvel. At this point, I've done Marvel Zombies Resurrection. I've done Captain America and a Batman Tales of the Dark Multiverse story I'm very proud of. I've been doing The Last God, my creator-owned series at DC Black Label for some time now, and that's about to wrap up. And now I've been announced as the writer for Superman and Alien this year, so super stoked.
That is an amazing career trajectory, and we'll sort of work our way through that. So, Last Sons of America was the first thing that I read that you had done, and the story, just the conceit of the story, is fascinating. And I was wondering, what was the impetus for the story? For those, again, unaware, the gist of it is that there was a chemical attack, I believe, Agent Pink, and it renders everyone in the United States essentially infertile, men and women, I'm presuming. And so these two brothers are operating. Well, I'll let you explain it. But what was the impetus for the story?
At the time, I mean, as a psychology podcast, you guys can dissect my own influences. There's a lot of things in my brain at the time kind of percolating together and they kind of came together into the stories as it became. Okay, so in 2010, I was just getting started really writing stories for anyone who wasn't my brother. And at the time, my wife and I were having trouble getting pregnant, and I'd pretty much accepted by that point it was not going to happen. And I was also doing a lot of anti-human trafficking work in the Baltimore area, this volunteer work. And at that same time, there was this big earthquake in Haiti that became this really terrible humanitarian crisis. And I remember hearing a piece on NPR about a church, like a mission group that went down to Haiti to help. And ostensibly, they went down there to help orphaned kids get adopted elsewhere. But they ended up grabbing a lot of kids who still had families. And there was a lot of different accounts of how it all went down and what they really did and their intentions. But in the end, they were trying to smuggle children out of Haiti's borders, which is super shady. And then I started looking more into the human trafficking issues that I knew about were stuff that was happening mostly in the U.S., like with kids who had been trafficked as children, often by their parents, or people who were trafficked to the States from other countries, either who were brought here under false pretenses as laborers, but or sex trafficked people. But the for-profit adoption industry was an aspect I hadn't really thought about much, didn't know anything about, and so I started doing more research into that aspect of it, and found out some pretty disturbing about how adoption really works. And obviously, I understand it's a complicated issue. There's people here that need kids in all countries. They want children, they can't have them themselves. But there are also some shady things that happen, like further down that pipeline. Like there are a lot of kids who are sold by their parents, whose parents just cannot afford to have them, sold for almost nothing to orphanages or churches or whatever, and then they sell those kids to adoption agencies, companies that need kids to, in turn, sell to Americans or whoever. It's just super screwed up. So there's a lot of people who have these stories supposedly of their parents dying. That's all BS. And there's actually a lot of those kids who get adopted. You still have families back home that would have preferred to keep them and just didn't work out that way. So my issues of infertility and human trafficking that was in my brain all the time at that point, and coupled with this thing that happened in Haiti, all kind of came together and congealed around this idea of, what if human trafficking was the only way we could have families anymore? Like, what if human trafficking became legit, and that's how families were made at that point? And the U.S., which from a certain perspective, can already be seen as kind of this, what's the word, consumer of people. This country that in some ways can just kind of chew people up. What if it literally became that thing? What if it became a consumer of children, where people, kids were sent here like furniture, and that's just how families were built. And that became the source for the story Lessons of America, a world in which Americans can't conceive naturally, and human trafficking becomes how it works.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was just a very hard-hitting read, and the social commentary I thought in it was absolutely fascinating, particularly on white America and what the idea of, because obviously it's impacting everybody in America, but there's comments throughout the story that the lighter children are valued more than the darker children. And it's just the scene in the Mercado, just I mean, I'm a parent, very young child, and Doc has a 9-year-old. And so just seeing just all of the family stuff just was a major gut punch to me. Just like I said, it was absolutely captivating from that perspective. So, Doc, I'll let you sort of chime in.
Well, I mean, just the idea that we always have these tropes, the children are our future, make sure no child left behind, whatever. I mean, we have all those things that we say. And yet, to that point, especially when you put the United States ultimate capitalism kind of spin on things, you certainly can see how that can become a pretty deep rabbit hole. And I really appreciate it in the story. It focuses initially on one child that is in theory being sold, and then the family just saying, wait, hold on, we really don't want to do this. And I remember the fact that it was supposed to go to this stereotypical middle-class couple that wants a child, and that's fair. But at the same time, I even remember one of the brothers just saying, like, well, wow, you've doomed your child to poverty. And I thought to myself, like, man, oh man, is that type of system, like, is that really what we're looking at here? Like, literally just you're I know I've used this term on the podcast before, the genetic lottery. Like, it's just a matter of the location of where you were born and what socioeconomic circumstances, and then everything else from there is kind of it's a random crapshoot. But then what you do with that setup from that point forward, it's something where cultures value those things differently. In many cultures, it's more like, okay, what do we do together? Like, what do we do as a group? Unfortunately, a lot of cultures don't have it set up that way. It's more like, well, what does the dictator say that everybody's supposed to do as a group? As opposed to the US, where it's more like, hey, whatever you can do, on one hand, it's a good thing. You have the ability to do anything. The actual resources, well, that's up to you. And it's not exactly strewn at your feet. So just having that full spectrum and a story that's so tightly connected in about, what was it, 4 books, like, for the total volume, like, just to have all that done so well packed, I think was impressive. I admit that I also deal with this on a professional basis in the sense that I often do shifts. Actually, today, I just did a shift for psychiatric emergency room, or a few of them simultaneously through telemedicine. And that's one of the things that we have to screen for, especially since a lot of people come in for drug-related issues. And so, that is something that the world is not nearly aware of as much as it should be, at least on the protection side. And now
God.
we're
so true.
Yeah, and we're really trying to do a better job even at the most basic primary care level. The idea that the only contact that some of these children get or some of these adolescents get is through an emergency room visit where they've already been told they can't say anything or else they're going to die. I mean, this is something that people, I don't think, realize is as big as it is.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, like when I was finding out more and more about, when listening to that piece, I just realized how ignorant I had been. In my mind, I kind of knew it all about human trafficking, and I was that had kind of become my passion at that point. Was anti-human trafficking work in the States, and the more, as I'm sure you guys have found out in your own life, like basically, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know anything. Like it's the better informed you become, you realize you know less and less of everything that's out there. And I just had this whole world open up in front of me, like Jesus. I thought I knew. I mean, I was already when you start doing a lot of human trafficking work, like a lot of it, you just think about the darkest crap all the time. It just consumes you. And for a while, I was just thinking about rape all day. Like it just is so crushing. Until I ultimately had to kind of take a step back from it. I guess I was like, I can't live my life. Like I can't function. I just went so deep into it. And just finding out everything that I did about overseas adoption stuff is just hard. Like how hard people have it and how fortunate we are and how screwed so many people are elsewhere and here too, but elsewhere. God, it was just it became this thing. It became the story that I just like had to tell, and I kind of dressed it up in a genre story. Like basically, I'll give it this high concept premise. Like here's a little bit of sci-fi, but really it's all true. It became a story that became very important for me to tell.
No, absolutely, and I was explaining to my wife about it today because she was asking me, "Oh, who are you talking to? And who are you interviewing for this episode and everything?" So I was telling her about Last Sons and how, again, outside of the whole Agent Pink thing, this is a very realistic story. It is very rooted in some very, as you say, dark and hard-hitting stuff. Now, Jackie and Julian, I love their dynamic, and listening to you at the start talk about working with your brother and wanting to sort of work with him on this stuff. It now puts the relationship between Jackie and Julian and the understanding that they have in a little better light. I'm like, oh, okay. I get it now. Okay, you're really close with your brother because I absolutely love the bond between Jackie and Julian, that Jackie is ever the older brother. He's the big brother, but Julian is sort of, dare I say, the smarter one, and he's sort of able to look beyond the next step. But what was sort of the driving force behind how that dynamic was conceived?
Yeah, I mean, you totally nailed it. You people see right through me. I forgot to mention my relationship with my brother when I was talking all the ideas floating around in my head at the time. That was, I think Bill was living with me when I came up with the idea for that story. And the dynamic is not as simple as it is in the book. I mean, in the book, you could argue that those two guys they kind of make up like one complete person. I mean, Jackie is the tall, good-looking one, physically capable, and seems to be the caregiver, not caregiver exactly, but like the one who's got it kind of, he's like put together, kind of looks after the two of them. But Julian is not only smarter, but also like the moral compass of the two, and he's the one who physically needs help to get around, needs help putting his shoes on and stuff, but he knows what to do. He speaks the language, and he's a much more sympathetic character in a lot of ways. And, Jackie's kind of a douchebag. And since I have it on good authority that Dr. Issues is a jazz fan, I'll say that Jackie and Julian were named. At the time I play trumpet myself, but I was listening to a lot of jazz saxophonists.
Mm-hmm.
And Jackie and Julian are named after two of my favorite jazz saxophonists, Jackie McLean and Julian Cannonball Adderley. So yeah, I wouldn't say that my brother Bill and I make up a single entity, or that like all my flaws are his strengths and vice versa, or anything like that. But I will say that people that know us, nobody says, "Oh, you look so much alike." Like literally no one. We do not look alike. We don't really talk the same or live our lives the same way. But when we're together, it just sort of makes sense. Like we just sort of click, and we like a lot of the same shit, and we'll just kind of talk, and we'll talk in similar ways about certain things, about books or movies. It's just so fun to talk to him, even though we live our lives in completely different ways, have different strengths and weaknesses, of course, but also different values, and we're just very different people. But when we're together, it sort of just makes sense, and it's just a real joy to be around him. I had a big hand in raising him when he was little, and I just love being with him. So yeah, that. I wanted the story to have a subtext that mattered, to have a message that mattered, but at the center, it's got to be about characters still, right? And I wanted it to be about these two brothers at its core, and that's how it ended up being.
Well, that certainly comes through in the story. You definitely get the notion that they do care about each other, they do need each other, even if they don't necessarily always see eye to eye. And it seems that they have to have each other's backs for one reason or another, because Jackie has to physically help Julian with a lot of the stuff, but Julian has to always be looking ahead to figure out what the next step is to keep Jackie out of trouble. So I definitely enjoyed that dynamic.
A thing that happens during the book that I really wanted to explore is that when they, spoilers for anyone who hasn't read it, I guess, but nothing specific, but at some point in the story, they're separated. So Jackie, the tall one, he's more physically capable. He's also more aggressive, right? He's the one that's more willing to get in a fight or whatever. Which, I mean, Julian doesn't really have that luxury. He's a short person, but also has like he's not. As anyone can plainly see in the page, he looks very much like Peter Dinklage. It was designed after Peter Dinklage to some degree, but he's not just a short and otherwise whole person. He has other little like physical
limitations.
Yeah. So he's not the fighter. That's Jackie. He's the rough and tumble guy. And Julian is a very compassionate character in general. Just cares about people. And for a while they're separated, and we see Julian become much more aggressive, and we see him kind of get in a fight with somebody, because you start to see him take on more characteristics of his missing brother. And you start to see Jackie kind of grow a soul somewhat and start to care about this kid that before he just saw as, Jackie sees himself as a retailer. He's just collecting kids to sell them, and that's what he does. He could be collecting, hardwoods or whatever. It could be anything. And for him, it's just kids. But then he starts to actually care about this kid, and you see both of them become more like the other brother. And when they come together again later, they're both more complete as people.
Yeah, definitely. Another character that I thought was very interesting was Harper Rowe. And so she's kind of the double agent of sorts, dare I say, not trying to spoil too much, but she's definitely, she comes across as one way initially, and then she's playing the long game. Where did the need for that sort of character and her situation come into play?
That was more of a world building thing at first. I wanted to see a little bit more we just need another character, someone that would betray them. But I wanted to see more of the job that those guys do. Like if you only ever see, like you see Rowe, you also see, I forget the guy's name, the other kid retailer, the D-bag guy who comes in their door. I forget his name.
Yeah. But
yeah, I just wanted to show a little more of this business that they're in, those characters kind of flesh out more of the world that we live in and what their role in it is. Somebody that they used to work with in the company that has since moved on is doing bigger things. And then we see the relationship with the government, and just a way to build out the world a little more, and you see a more complete picture of what it is. So you don't only see the two brothers.
Yeah. The thing I was just going to jump in a little bit with that is it reminded me of, and I apologize for relating everything to a lot of the work I do. It reminds me of like child protective services versus like private therapists versus, these other like more international agencies where, they're a conglomerate that can get things done, but at the same time, you're not exactly sure what their motivations are, and just how all of these things kind of combine to make everything work. I mean, it doesn't always work great, but you deal with what you got.
Yeah, exactly. There's depending on, now, as you guys probably know, the story is in development right now for film. And if that continues and if it gets made, I'd say it's very likely that we'll see a Last Son sequel. And if that happens, we'll see more of Rowe and that company that she's with and how that all goes down.
I actually was not aware that it was being developed, but it's funny that you say that, because as I was reading this, I was like, this could very easily be a movie. It's just very tight. It's very cinematic in the scope and the storytelling. And again, all the issues that we were discussing earlier, very much relatable to the world in which we live. And I certainly hope that if and when it does get made into a movie, aside from, definitely being there to buy a ticket, I hope that in some way this helps to spread awareness and shed a light on some of these issues that we're discussing, and that some resources can be put towards helping the victims of human trafficking and these, these horrible crimes that, as you said, are happening everywhere, and that hopefully, we can help use the story to shine a light on it and make the world a little bit brighter.
Thanks. Yeah, that is the hope.
So I want to pivot now then to Kill a Man. I loved this story, and I know that this is actually our major patron, Ariel, was the one who finished reading this and wrote a lengthy review on it, and that's sort of how she mentioned us in speaking with you, and that's sort of how you came into our circle. But like I said, I loved this story as well. And I'm not just saying these things because I'm not trying to sound like I'm blowing smoke up your ass. I promise. But this was such an incredible story, and one that I also think, frankly, can and should be adapted into film. What was the genesis for this? Because I read it as a commentary on the hypermasculinity of MMA. And
I'm gonna jump in right here because
you're the MMA guy, so I defer to you on this.
Hold on. I'm not let me make this clear. When Anthony says that, I can't pretend like I don't fight. I don't train for it or anything. It's just that my parents still have the visage of my dad holding me as a little baby, watching fights on television. I grew up with this, and it's something that's core to me. And a lot of people think it's like the antithesis of what I do as a doctor, but at the same time, for whatever reason, it's just something I can't let go, just that spirit. But one of the stories that he always told me about way before my time was Emil Griffith and Benny the Kid Paret and that horrible scenario of everything that happened. And there was a documentary even that I watched about that afterwards, because they wanted to get his perspective and how he felt. He actually met the offspring, the family member of Benny the Kid Paret. Just not, spoilers. Basically, there was a slur used.
Slurs for 1960s.
I know. But the point is, it's pretty much the similar scenario with this book where the fighter dies after, he had very clearly made a lot of derogatory comments. It's just that this has a much different twist in that the offspring of that deceased fighter is also gay himself and gets outed by, his future opponent. And all of the aftermath. And here's the problem. It's not a problem, but here's the thing that I noticed. The entire time I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is 100% exactly the way I think a lot of it would play out in terms of the setup.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that sucks, but you're probably right. First of all, that's cool that you used to, like, you grew up watching the fights and all that. I've never been able to really get into most sports as a viewer. I can't get into watching golf, basketball, football. Anything that just like involves a ball, to me, just always feels like kid stuff. I don't know. I totally understand. I'm not throwing shade at anybody who likes any kind of sport. It's all good. But I personally cannot relate to it. Having grown up kind of out in the country, never really had a crew. But fighting just makes sense to me. Maybe that makes me a savage, but to me, it's like it's just a contest that has real world applications. I feel like self-defense is important, and I just love watching the fight, and it's something I enjoy practicing myself. Like sparring is something that I think is very important, and I'm teaching my son stuff now, and I just love MMA. And yeah, it was meant to be kind of I can't take credit for the basic premise of the book. It was brought to me by Steve Orlando, my co-writer, and Steve is himself an important voice of LGBTQ in comics. And he and I met, well, we had kind of met in passing before that, but never really got to know each other at all until AlbanyCon a few years ago. We have a great mutual friend in Ron Mars, and he lives up that way, and Steve used to as well. And so I'd heard a lot about AlbanyCon, so I went up there as a guest. And that first night we were all hanging out, and they had a little spread for us at the hotel. And Steve's the fancy pants as far as food, and he was like, these wings aren't good enough. Let's go someplace really nice. And so he had some dive place in town that he knew. I guess he'd gone to school there, and he was like, "This is another place we got to go to." So he brought us all to this other place, and we got just a ton of wings. And there was a fight on that night, and that's when I found out that Steve was starting to get into MMA. And I was already, by that point I was sparring like every week. I mean, like every week fighting with someone. And Steve had been a wrestling fan forever and was getting into MMA then, which I don't regard as the same thing at all. I can't get into wrestling, but he's a huge fan. Just the pageantry of it and stuff, I just don't get it. But Steve loves it, and at some point he made the jump to MMA, and we were talking about that. I was kind of giving him shit about wrestling, and he was kind of asking questions about fighting and talking about his favorite fighters at that point. And we just bonded over the fights on pay-per-view and eating wings till we died. And it was really fun. And not long after that, he had an idea. He had watched Creed, and similar to what I was talking about with the impetus for Last Sons of America, he's had a bunch of ideas in his head that kind of came together and became the idea for Kill a Man. He was also became aware of the Emil Griffith story and how he had essentially beaten a man to death after calling him a gay slur. Benny died later of his wounds, not in the ring, but he never recovered. And how powerful that was for him and how it kind of shaped his life. Between that and just loving the movie Creed and Steve's own experiences as a bisexual man himself with his own family and his own life, he just it all came together into this idea that he wanted to write, but he wanted to co-write it with me as someone who really knew the ins and outs of, I'm not I've never fought in the UFC or anything, but I just know a lot about it, not just in the cage, but also just the business of it a little bit. And he wanted to write it with me. So we came together, and he was like, "Well, how would the story work?" And I was like, "Well, I'll tell you what would happen in real life if this happened. Like if this guy got outed, the way MMA culture is, I think that, there's literally not a single, to my knowledge, not a single out male queer fighter in the UFC. And I just find it hard to believe that there's literally no one. So, it's, if you're a female, it's cool. But for a guy to be queer and fight, there's like this dissonance that doesn't make sense in that culture. So yeah, I feel like if somebody was outed against his will as gay before his big title shot, I feel like there would be this big kind of, hubbub about it. So we explored that basically. So we take the kind of told the story of these pioneers in the sport and ends up getting beaten to death in the ring as a result. Generation later, the bigot's son who watched him get killed in the ring has grown up to be gay himself and has obviously kept that way deep down because he's grown up hating this other dude, but at some point recognizes it himself and couldn't tell anyone because like this huge shameful lie. And when it's revealed who he is and what he is, he loses his endorsements. He loses the support of his organization. He loses his fans. This kind of story is made up. It's like, oh, well, actually, there was an illegal shot earlier in the fight, so now he's not going to get his title shot like he was about to. And then the only trainer that will touch him is the guy who actually killed his dad back in the day. So it's kind of like the Rocky story, but if he had to train with, if Creed, instead of training with Rocky, had to train with Ivan Drago. Yeah. And that was the basis for that story.
Yeah, I could definitely see the comparison to the Creed story there. And I do know that at least some of that stuff was discussed in Creed 2 with the whole Creed versus Drago's son and the legacy and everything. My question, just like a side note, the promoter whose name I forget is basically like Dana White turned really horribly evil, right? That's basically how you...
Or Dana White kind of like just amplified just a smidge. I'm sorry. I'm not blowing anything up. I'm just... Look, there's so much, be it MMA, be it other martial arts, be it boxing, all of it. There's just this side to it that just has this feel where, as with many things in life, like the bottom dollar comes above all else. And that comes across very clearly
No,
with
absolutely. And I know that Dana White is not exactly the most beloved figure, but I was reading this and I was like, so this is Dana White as an unabashed heel. Like that's,
I mean,
like
yeah,
Dana White just didn't care what he was perceived as.
yeah. I mean, the character's name is Terry Brown. Okay, let's find another unisex first name and another color, and like we'll just put it on his face, like this is who it's about. Yeah, I don't know Dana personally, so I can't speak of how he is in real life, but I know that fighters get grossly taken advantage of financially. I know that there's a lot of the people that fight, even in the UFC, are just not making any money. I mean, they might make, if you're on the undercard on a UFC event, even if it's a pay-per-view event, let's say like you're on McGregor versus Poirier 2, and you're like the first fighter of the night, those guys might be making 20 grand. And out of that, they got to pay their own fight camp. Usually they're paying their own travel to get there, or at least they were recently, assuming that's still the case. They got to pay their effing plane ticket to get there. I mean, sometimes they're making literally nothing to fight for the UFC. It was like this insanely huge organization that's making so much money.
And McGregor's getting, all the purse.
Millions.
The big name fighters are getting all the money.
Yeah. I mean, there are fighters who are doing great, but you got to be not only an amazing fighter, but you've also got to be able to sell yourself. You got to market yourself. You got to make yourself into a superstar, like a Muhammad Ali style cult of personality, to make any kind of money there. I mean, or just be such a dominant figure in the sport that you just can't be denied. Like, like GSP did when he was fighting. Like he was also a colorful personality in his way, but he wasn't like a big trash talker like McGregor, or like this big, this person with walked out with a huge flag and like Sinead O'Connor's singing, and like you're making a big scene when you're in your normal life. And there's the showmanship that's got to be a part of it if you really want to make a splash financially in MMA. I just hate that, man. In boxing, that is not the case. You can make so much more money in boxing. Not that everyone does. Right. Boxing is kind of gross in a different way, where there are these people who are brought up as champions. Like, okay, this guy's going to be one of our champions, and there are these other people who are brought up just to be tomato cans to pad the champions' records. Like, this guy's never going to make it as a champion, but he's very talented, just not talented enough. He's like B+ talented. So we're going to put him up against so-and-so as a stepping stone to get to so-and-so, with the expectation that he will definitely lose. And so, he's fighting just to kind of feed his family. Meanwhile, this other guy who they're trying to build up into the next Floyd Mayweather makes real money. And it's just gross. They're not, so you got people who make it to the very highest levels of the sport, as far as like their name on the roster, who have not necessarily ever really been challenged in the way that MMA guys are when they get up there. Like when you see somebody in MMA who's like 15-1, that dude is serious.
Right.
But once somebody has been at the top tiers of MMA for a while, there's almost nobody that has a record like that, because they're pitting the best against the best. So you've even got legends of the sport, Hall of Famers, who have got records like 20-8 or something, because they've been going against other champions for like 2/3 of their career. Randy Couture, that guy was a champion. He got into MMA later in life, but he was still he was fighting when he was like 30, I think, or 31. And then he kept fighting, and he was champion pretty early. And he just kept getting, by that point, he was going up against other champions his whole career practically. He retired and he was like 48 or something.
Right.
So, meanwhile, you got Floyd Mayweather, who's quote unquote never lost, but he was also extremely selective on who he fought and at what point in their career he was fighting them.
Correct.
So you've got him fighting against like Manny Pacquiao or whatever.
Yeah.
Or Pacquiao, but
way past Pacquiao's prime, and in what was a $100 million money grab. I'm even thinking
I watched that fight in your basement, Doc.
I know. And so, but that brings up a great point in the sense that early, and only because I admit I follow a lot of this stuff. So Floyd Mayweather's a great example, though, because early in his career, before he ever made that type of money, and you could look at YouTube videos, it was like he was a different fighter, still very defensive, but you could actually see incredible talent. And actually, when he was facing the type of competition just to build up to that, when he really had to, when he was quote unquote Pretty Boy Floyd, it was much different. People didn't really care nearly as much. He didn't make nearly as much money. All of a sudden, when he becomes Money Mayweather and he starts flashing all of these things and doing all of these theatrics and stuff, and people are saying, oh, I can't wait for that guy to lose. And he gets more selective and picks and chooses. Now, all of a sudden, the money really starts flowing in. Well, now you've just totally flipped the idea of competition on its head and the idea of what you're supposed to be doing. So I'm definitely with you in that. And at least with the UFC, because it's an organization that has people that you're going to have to continue to fight at a certain level, and you're going to have to continue to fight at a certain pace, you're going to get a better overall product with the competition, as opposed to boxing, which is the wild, wild west, where, you literally you craft the schedule, you craft who you fight when, teasers of who can fight who that don't happen for 5 or 6 years even. It's a bizarre way to look at sports. And I actually, to bring it back to the book, you take someone who's a champion and recognizes that he doesn't have the dramatics of his opponent and decides, what can I do? What can I do to bring this, major attention? And it's like, what's the one piece of ammunition that I got? And it's like, personal life be damned. I'm going to use this. This is my one silver bullet, and I'm going to do this. And never mind that it's going to destroy a person's life. But if I do this now, then what does this do for my career? What does this do for my family? All those things. And to just throw something like that out there.
Yeah, the duality of the title, Kill a Man, not just the death of DJ, but also the attempt to kill James's career, and his secret. And so he doesn't die physically, but his life as he knew it dies, and the double life. So I loved the duality of the title.
Thanks. That actually came from an Emil Griffith quote. The title Kill a Man, it refers to what's his name? God, the bad guy. Derek Waldron does to James Bellyi, but also what James wants to do to him. Like he's training with the guy who killed his dad because he wants that knockout power that he can use to kill. Yeah. He wants to also kill a man in the ring. Yeah. Doesn't feel like he has the power in his hands to do it and wants that power. Yeah. But also there's an Emil Griffith quote where he said, like, I love a man. I can't remember the quote offhand. Shoot. If I'd known we were going to get to that, I would have. Something about, like, if I killed a man and people forgive me, but if I love a man, people think I'm evil or something like that.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah, I do remember. I was going to say, I don't remember the exact quote, but yeah, as soon as you mentioned it, I'm like, I do remember him saying something along those lines.
And Xavier, I think, is just such a really compelling character in this as well, because, he's got the difficulty of living with what he did, plus the unfortunate stigma attached and the homophobia and everything like that. Was there anybody, aside from the Emil Griffith story, was there anything else that you sort of drew upon to create Xavier? Because we really only ever get to see Xavier as the older man, in the story. But was there anything that you sort of worked with Steve on this, and the two of you, sort of how you crafted Xavier and what happened to him over the course of his life to get him to the point that we see him at now in the quote unquote present?
Mostly Emil Griffith, really. And I looked up that quote just now because it was killing me. So it says, I kill a man and most people forgive me. However, I love a man and many say this makes me an evil person. That's what he said. So it's about, I crafted him around as far as who he is and his figure in MMA, I crafted him around those early pioneers. Like when MMA first started, when UFC, the UFC first began, it was kind of like the little kid superhero thing. What if Wolverine fought so-and-so? Like, who would win? What if Batman fought Wolverine? And what if Captain America fought Superman? What if it was kind of that approach where you take a Kempo fighter and put him against a sumo wrestler, or a boxer against
I remember watching those
one man
early
in the
VHS.
very first UFC wore a boxing glove, like a single boxing glove in the ring. I remember that.
Right. It was just such a mess. No one knew what to do. No weight classes, not really any rounds. Basically, I think it was like a half hour. You just get in there and you just fight until somebody falls, until somebody can't get up. it was just this crazy thing. So most people were very one-dimensional. And Xavier, I envisioned him as, as a striker with incredible power in his hands. Beyond that, it was mostly just crafted by the Emil Griffith story and what that killing did to him after that. Like, it changed his fighting style. It kind of, I won't say ruined his career, because he was a literal champion. He's one of the greatest of all time. But it definitely haunted him. And I wanted to see a man who had been haunted, like who kind of became a different fighter after that, and sort of, in the end, sort of lost everything, lost his chance at real greatness because of that event and how it affected him, throughout his life after that.
And last, I really don't want to spoil anything, but the ending I thought was a very interesting take on it. Was there any consideration given to a complete happy ending? I'm really trying not to spoil again too much. Was there any consideration given to that, or was it like that's too much for him to have ostensibly overcome?
Yeah, actually, when we were putting this together, it made sense to, like, the happy, like the pure happy ending thing made sense to me. And Steve had envisioned a very different ending, and I was like, look, we just can't do that. Like, we can't do it. We can't. Otherwise, what's this all been for?
Yeah, just to jump in a little bit on that piece, I'll be honest, as I was reading it, I this says a lot about me. I was like, oh, I really hope this has some sort of happy resolution, because I could really see a negative, like a really dark ending from that. And the fact that it didn't, once again, not to spoil everything, but the fact that it didn't actually gave me a lot of hope. And that's the thing about that, about the comic in total. I felt like it was as much as I said, like, oh, wow, this is exactly how I feel it would turn out. It really did give the idea. And I could also see that. I could see people being able to accept that, especially based on the merits of what is happening in real time. And that's the part that I think still attracts me to fighting. Is all other sports we look at as metaphors for what men, or people in general, because obviously women are involved too, of what people do in terms of will. Fighting is the only one that really gets to the core of it. What happens when two people are willing to test their wills against one another in every possible capacity? And despite all of the other things going on outside of it, be it the social things, the financial things, all of that stuff, when two people are actually in the octagon or in the ring or whatever, that gets, at least to a certain degree, that gets silenced. There are still clearly outside forces that can change, like, the official results, but everybody knows what they see. Everybody, or if you're in the ring, you know what you felt and you know what you did. And ultimately, that's what you have to live with.
Yeah. I mean, there's originally this book was going to be 2 volumes. The first one was going to end right as he was about to go out in that first fight. Mm-hmm. Not first fight, but like the midpoint fight, when he was, he got a shot at this other fighter. And in that one, he technically won, but was getting booed, and everyone's like, no, he saw, like, no one's in my corner. Like, no one believes in me. No one accepts me for who I am. Steve really wanted the last fight to be about accepting, like, James accepting who he is. Like, that was the real struggle, is accepting who he is and just being who he is and being happy with that. And that's enough. And I was like, that's not enough. That is not enough. The other part of the struggle he's doing is getting the thing that he really wanted to achieve. Like, and it's not about necessarily the belt. It's about facing his enemy, his tangible living enemy who did this to him. And obviously accepting yourself is a huge deal. But if he still kicked to the curb and still loses the whole thing he always worked for and all that, it's not. Yeah, we went around about that ending quite a bit, but in the end, the one we came up with, I thought, is the perfect ending that neither one of us would have come up with alone. Because now, I wish we could spoil it, but we can't spoil it. Yeah. So, it was the okay. So, we see the truth of Terry Brown's role. We see the audience reaction. We see Derek Waldron's reaction. We see James's reaction, Xavier's. Everyone know what they saw. Everyone knows what happened. And that is enough. So I really liked how it turned out. It exposes Terry Brown, and I don't know, I really dug it. So I was very happy with how it came out.
No, and not saying at all that it was a bad ending. It was just, like I said, from my perspective, I was like, I wonder if they could have given just like a little bit more, but I was like, no, that would have been like
I thought it was perfect. I thought it was perfect, especially.
No, I agree.
Especially for the sport itself. That I'm like, okay, that, like I said, that throughout the book, I'm like, okay, either this person is one of the greatest researchers for MMA imaginable without having knowledge of it, or this person knows about MMA. Either way.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, and the art as well. That's obviously not your purview, but I thought the art did such a fantastic job of telling the story just as much as the words did, because obviously a book about fighting, you need somebody who's going to portray the fights in a realistic fashion and draw you in with the imagery and the fluidity and the power just as much as a story. And I thought that the book certainly did that.
Thanks. Yeah, Al is also a talented artist and a mixed martial artist as well. And so he was a nice choice for that, because he knew that I could just refer to a fight or a move or a fighter, and he knew what I was talking about. And sometimes you could see both of our fighting styles come through the art. Like I would say, okay, so he drops his level to get under the hook and then goes straight in for the double leg takedown, which is what I would do. And then it would come back and the fighter takes a different approach. I'm like, well, shit. Now he did a spinning back. He just did a spinning back elbow instead. And now, I got the impression I was seeing Al's fighting style come through instead, which was totally fine. It was just funny to see us almost fighting in the script. Like he does this move and then he comes back. It's like, nope, he did this other thing. And it was fine. But I really liked how it turned out. And he very clearly knows what he's doing. And it was really fun. It was a fun experience.
Yeah. And it's a very, very compelling and interesting read. So I want to briefly touch on then, I know we spent a lot of time talking about two very real and rooted in real stories. Now we're going to shift a little bit to high fantasy with The Last God, swords and sorcery, high fantasy, very D&D-esque. Where did you come up with the idea for the parallel timelines for the story?
That, I'm not sure exactly. Let's see. The premise for the story was that, okay, so my editor actually pitched it to me, not any detail, but he was just like, hey, so this is the quote. I've quoted this a couple of times, but he said, would you want to do a horror story, but in a world where there's like wizards and shit? like that was the exact quote. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I do. I want to do that. So yeah, let me see what I can come up with. So to back up a little, Amadeo Torturo, my editor, is hugely into D&D. And when he's not doing comics, he's doing tabletop gaming. It's like one of his passions. And he wanted to do, and we had worked together before and he knew I was into horror stuff and he wanted like a dark take on a D&D type story. And so I just kind of ran with that and came up with this idea for a world in which the Fellowship had failed, like Tolkien is in my blood as far as fantasy stuff. I see my head goes to Tolkien first, but I also like when I was in high school, I read a lot of Dragonlance, and then later on, and actually in the Shannara stuff too, the Terry Brooks books. And since then, of course, George R.R. Martin, the ones that are done, the ones that are finished.
Get to writing, George.
Yeah, he's busy. It's fine. We'll get to it someday. So anyway, I thought of Tolkien stuff, but in a very there are things that Tolkien shied away from in his work that I would love to have seen him tackle. You never really see different religions in his work. I mean, if you read the Silmarillion, he's telling you like the capital T truth of divinity in that world, but you never see the different religions of different cultures or any kind of messiness there, And I thought that'd be kind of cool to see. You never see any kind of racial tension to speak of. There's a little bit of that, but not as much as I would prefer. I kind of want to see more of the bleakness of the Robert E. Howard stuff. So that's where that kind of came from. And sorry, I think I might have gotten away from the question a little bit, but that's where the whole story kind of came from.
Yeah. Just kind of taking a little spin on Anthony's question, but basically, and I apologize, my style usually isn't like directly with questions, it's just observations and then you can riff on it. But the thing that comes to mind with me, I've said it on this podcast plenty of times, history may not repeat itself, but it sure as hell rhymes. And that's definitely the feel that I get from The Last God. The idea, not necessarily that everything is going to work out exactly the way you expect, but at the same time, fully well, if people in these same circumstances with these same types of conflicts, these, as you mentioned, like racial tensions, the everything, misogyny, all of these different undercurrents of just messy life that doesn't just go away when you quote unquote slay the bad, slay the evil villain or the demon, like that stuff's still gonna be there.
It is. And yeah, sorry, I remember the original question now about the timeline. I have, yes, that's kind of the reason I wanted to show that. I wanted to see the world where everything is supposedly fine, like at the end of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and then at some point find out that that was all bullshit, and actually a very different thing happened. And the message beneath everything is, it's about the lies we tell our children, but we portray ourselves as knowing everything, and really we're just like them. And I wanted to show that. I wanted to show these heroes that actually were much more and less than they portray themselves to be, and then show another generation. And to do that effectively, you'd have to eventually find out what actually did happen back in the day. And I thought that gave us a really interesting opportunity to show basically two adventures at once, and kind of show, the new generation who's kind of been swept up in this adventure, and then bit by bit, as it made sense, to show what actually happened back in the day. At the time, I was not consciously drawing on True Detective, but I did watch and love that first season. And the third season as well. But the first season was pretty amazing storytelling. And I've got a certain number, like all of us do. I have a certain number of stories that just are deep in me, that really meant a lot to me and kind of shape how I tell stories too. And True Detective was one of those. So I would say that was probably an influence. But it was never like a conscious decision, like I'm going to tell two stories at once. It just sort of worked out that way as I started fleshing it out, because I wanted to see the characters in their heyday, but we see them in the future, and this awful thing is returned, is killing them one by one. This horror story that's coming for all of them, one after the next. So yeah, it just sort of became the most efficient and interesting way to tell that story.
Yeah, and of course we're recording this right before the last book, issue number 12 comes out, but by the time this is released, it will have been out. So I'm very curious to see how this all ends. But one of the things that I do appreciate is just the world building and the little notes afterwards, and the stories that are told, and there's songs and such. And even the book itself is called book 1 of the Felspire Chronicles, I believe. So how much work is being put into additional stories beyond this? Because as I said, high fantasy isn't really totally my bag, but I'm getting...
Says the guy that is currently playing D&D.
I just started D&D 3 months ago, and it's my first exposure into this world. So I'm not, cut me some slack, bro. but it is drawing me in more and more as a story. So are there plans for, book 2 of the Felspire Chronicles? And if so, what are the plans there?
I would love to. And I think I speak for Ricardo, as he would love to as well. We are both working on projects for a bit, but I would love to come back to it. They probably will not all be as long as this one was, but I would love to come back and do it more arcs. Just in the act of writing this story, there was, so many other stories kind of came into existence just in fleshing out the world, making it feel real. When you read a story that's just on its surface writing, when you know that you're reading everything that's been written for that story, you can just tell. You can tell if there's no additional stuff that's not on the page. You can tell. Whereas, as you read, Song of Ice and Fire or anything that Tolkien ever did, you can tell that you're just reading the surface of this super deep thing. And I didn't want to do the small ball version of that. I wanted it to feel as real and fleshed out and old and lived in as those other worlds that we all love. So, even basically anytime there's a question, for example, in the first issue, when I'm drawing or writing a story about, Avender and his buddy are walking through the slave cradles, which is the slave part of town. I'm describing what the walls look like in the alleyways. And that just kind of what would they look like? And that is answered with another question. Well, how old is it compared to the rest of the city? And that means, okay, how old is the city? Was it always a human city? And it just one question leads to another question. And I would just try to answer every question that came up. And then that all led to just the world getting bigger and bigger and bigger and older until I finally found out. I feel like I'm just discovering the information, not writing it. The slave cradles were not part of the original city. The original city was an elven city that was created as like an elven fortress that was eventually conquered by King so-and-so. And eventually this other wall was made around that one, so now we know which walls are made with stone, which ones with clay. And, so in the quest to answer to write literally one sentence description of the walls in the alley, now I know centuries of history of the city, and it took forever. Like writing a script that way takes forever, but it makes the world just feel more lived in and real. And like for later in that same issue, you see the palace on fire, and there's a statue on the front of this woman holding a shield and spear. I never asked for her to be there. Ricardo just added her in. And the thing is, the Tirgaladan culture is very patriarchal. It's all about men. And women kind of are not a big deal in their importance compared to the men. And it didn't make sense for her to be there. But I'm not going to ask him to take it out because she looked awesome. And I was like, okay, so if she's on the palace in armor, she must be super badass. And like in history, we've had these Joan of Arc characters. So who is she? And that led to the creation of Q Lee, Queen of Rivers, who was one of the big stars of the back matter that was in a lot of these issues. So now I know Q Lee's entire life, and not just for that back matter, but also for other stories that have come up since then. So, I could do 2 more chapters just about her. We could do book 2 and 3 of the Feldspar Chronicles just about Q Lee and her adventures. Not that we're going to do that. I could say the same thing about 20 other characters. So in the development of the story, so many other stories kind of came into existence to flesh out the one that you have read.
Yeah. And when we spoke to Erica Schultz a while back, I think it was maybe for the 12 Devils Dancing, you talk about the fact that you can tell how much work was put in when you see the secondary characters and you go, I want to know what's going on there. Like, I'm cool with this story, but who's this side character and what's their deal and stuff? And so that to me is the sign of a writer who has done their work. And it is obvious from the breadth of information that was in the story and the back matter and everything. Like you did your research, son, and if you DM, I will be there. Like,
thank you.
I'm sure you make a fantastic DM. I will do whatever quest you come up with. And like I said, I'm only a couple of months into it myself. Although I say this and I've got a D20 sitting on the desk in front of me. I got my dice we play on, Friday nights. I'm a tiefling rogue.
Oh my goodness. I'm just realizing that our listeners are getting so much of the other random stuff that Anthony and I are into. And
it didn't even turn out this way.
Yeah. I didn't even think it was going to go along these lines. This is so cool.
It is cool. So, like I said, by the time this comes out, issue 12 will have been out. So go pick that up and finish the story. So Superman and Alien, I just want to end on those. Superman, you're taking over for Brian Michael Bendis. What are some of the things that you've got planned for Clark and the stories, and what are you sort of looking to do? It's a hack question to say, what are you going to do differently from Brian? But where are some of the areas that you want to focus on for Superman, because he is just such a well of incredible stories over 80 years.
Man, I love what Superman means to the world, what he means to Earth and to America and to Metropolis, but I want to see what he means to the universe, the multiverse. I thought Bendis did an amazing job humanizing Superman, and he really kicked the tires of the character and the cast and everything, and figured out what worked and where he wanted to make changes, and he took big swings and made a lot of changes to the status quo, which I respect. It was, some super ballsy moves. Not everyone loved it. There are people that got pissed about the John thing, about giving up the secret identity. There are a lot of changes in the status quo right now. Like Jimmy Olsen owns the planet. Like there's a lot of changes that happened. I tend to not kick the tires in the same kind of way, but what I prefer to do is, well, plus it's already been done. Like I'm taking the cards that have been dealt where Clark is now, and I feel like there are, like it or love it or hate it, there are opportunities now with John, the United Planets, and all these things. We have these opportunities to tell different kinds of stories than we were able to before. So I'm kind of running with that. We're going to see more of the context of the United Planets and what the Kent family means to the universe now. I don't feel the need to dig super deep into the Daily Planet cast right now because we spent so much time with the planet lately. I'm willing to let that rest for now, and instead not focus so much on the man in Superman, but the super in Superman, and see him at his most epic. And I want to see these huge cosmic epic stories. That's what I want to do. I remember looking back when I was a kid, I had this annual issue of Superman holding up a sword, and I was just captured. I was like, oh my God, that looks so amazing. And I was, I'm like a little kid, but and the story ended up being super weird, but that cover looked rad. And it just that's one of those things that it's an image that captured me. And now I'm basically building a story around that image, like where I want to see Superman at his most epic. And that's what I'm doing. I'm really exploring the super in Superman, but also what he means as a person. I want to remind the world that it's not his powers that really make him who he is. That's kind of my mission statement. Like his powers should never be the point. The powers are the vehicle through which we see how incorruptible he is, if that makes sense.
You're singing my song.
This is something that I have been praising ever since I was a child. So just a little background. The way I got into comics in general was through pretty much Superman. And don't get me wrong, I loved reading Marvel stuff. I loved reading Batman. I loved reading other DC stuff. I would get my hands on not just the regular Superman run. I would look for every alternate universe or what if story or anything, because it seemed like all of the stories came back to that one thing, that Superman is meant to be the best of us. And if you can remember that, you can do just about anything else with the character. So from that standpoint, just to hear you say something that kind of, resonates in my mind. I don't know. I just, that triggered something in my brain. Not that I wasn't interested before, but I mean, that's an impressive thing to say. It's something that I think gets a little thrown away only because the biggest complaint is, oh, well, what else can you do with Superman? He's Superman, like you could do anything. Like that's not even close to the point.
Yeah, agreed. People always say, Superman's hard to write or he's hard to read or whatever because he's too powerful or he's too perfect. He's just a big Boy Scout and all that. I refute that. Like first of all, even just physically, he tangles with things that are powerful enough to kill him all the fucking time. Like he's powerful, but it's not like he's the only powerful thing that's out there. We see him fighting strong stuff all the time. So that's not like you can't give him physical challenges. But also, I refute the fact that you have to make him somehow broken or flawed to make him interesting. Like he is meant to be the best of us. Like you said, I literally say that in my first issue. Like I'm not sure if you guys read the first issue of Worlds of War, but the first two Worlds of War, Future State Worlds of War 1 and 2 together make up my mission statement on Superman. The first issue is humanity's statement on who Superman is, like what he means to us. And the second issue is Superman's statement on who we are, what we mean to him.
Are you listening, Zach? Do you hear this?
We read an op-ed article that Clark Kent wrote about a specific person, and it's parallel for it. Basically, it tells us who Superman is. That is my mission statement on who Superman is, and then it kind of introduces everything I do after that, like my actual monthly run that comes later. But
loving it. We'll be adding that to the poll list. No question.
I just want to see. I want to see a. Especially this year, I want to see somebody who absolute power has not corrupted. Like absolute power is his, but he wields it with absolute humility and compassion. And that's what I want to see from Superman. I want to feel that same. I want to hear John Williams' trumpet lines in my head as the S shield comes on screen. I want to feel that I felt as a kid. I want to feel that whenever I read him.
Oh man,
you're singing my song. So, so pivoting to the complete opposite almost of Superman, Alien.
This other thing.
This other thing, you talked earlier about the horror. I think there's so much room for that here. How much of the existing mythology is going to be in the book and how much freedom do you have to work with the story. You know, there's obviously a very huge IP, and I just wanted to know sort of what your starting base is for this and where we're gonna go.
I want to start very much in the world of the movies. I have a lot of respect for all the Dark Horse stuff that has been put out. A lot of that stuff is super great. They did so many arcs. They got real creative, and some of them took such big, bold steps. And I mean, some of them like stood on the shoulders of previous arcs a little bit too. And so we've got stuff like the royal jelly that comes from the eggs, and that is a narcotic. And you've got all the different iterations of aliens that we've seen that come from different species, and we've seen other alien races, and we've seen android xenomorphs that speak English, and like they took such bold steps that it's hard to put them in the same mental box as the films. It doesn't seem plausible in the same way that the films do. If you only ever experience the films, with the exception of Resurrection, which I feel like was a huge misstep, but if you just take the prequels and Alien 1 through 3, I feel like those have a very specific universe that makes sense together. I want these stories to take place in the same universe as those movies. It doesn't mean we're not going to take big steps and do creative things and add to the mythology, because as we've established, I love doing that. I love, like, world building is why I'm in comics, and we're going to world build for sure. But when we start this first arc, especially, we're going to start from a place that's in the same time period as the second film, the James Cameron film, and that's where we're going to live at first. We're going to see, a lot of the same through lines and subplots that we saw in those original films, with the androids and the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. And we're going to see the aliens start from a place that we recognize. But also it's tricky because we have to kind of dance this line where you want to, in that first movie, man, when the chest burster pops out of John Hurt, it's like this, oh my God, what am I seeing? Moment that you just can't replicate. It's like the most horrible thing. You just feel so gross and like shocked at what you're seeing. You've got to replicate that feeling again, but you can't just show the same thing as we showed before, because we've seen it now. And I think that the Giger alien is the perfect expression of fear on film. Perfect. Like, for my money, you can't do better than Giger for horror on film.
No argument here.
But I don't want to change that. You can't improve on that. It's got this horrible perfection. It's like, this is it, but you've got to develop that fear in some ways that I think the prequels and sequels did beautifully. Like, the first movie, you've got the classic xenomorph and the chest burster and the other stuff, like the ovomorph, and the idea of their life cycle is so gross and intrusive. And then in the second movie, you take another step in. Now you're in the nest and you see the queen, and it's just so badass. And then you see another one that comes from a quadruped. It keeps taking these little steps forward in ways that make sense. And then the prequels, we again continue to see the development. But it all feels like Giger, and that's very important to me, that it all feels like it's of the same mind.
Yeah. Well, for me, I mean, obviously the chest burster, very iconic scene. But for me, the best part of that first movie is where Ripley knows that it's just her and the alien, and she's looking, and it's moving around the ship, and you don't know where he is. And then the scene with Jonesy and the fake scare, and then she's like, oh, I'm safe, and then the background moves and you realize that the alien has been there all along. And that's the horror stuff that I love. And so if this book captures even a tenth of that for me, I'm gonna just lose my shit.
There will be some of that. I love the vibe of the first movie where it's all claustrophobic and you're trapped in there, like exactly what you're describing, where you're trapped in there with this thing that you can't see, and then it's there and it's eating you. It's like you're trapped. There's nowhere to go. You're stuck in space. You're just a blue collar dude. What are you supposed to do? And then in the second one, it's such a different kind of movie. It's like the Space Marine stuff with aliens everywhere. It's such a different kind of horror. And plus that movie casts such a long shadow. Like, if I had to pick a movie, I guess I'd say I prefer the first one, but they're both so iconic and amazing. You can't walk back that second movie, because it's just such an integral part of what the alien lore is now. So I try to take the best of both those movies and work them into the story.
Works for me. All right. So I know we said we were going to, we'll be it shortly. And we kept going, but there's so much here and there's so much, we didn't get into Warlords of Appalachia or, anything else. And I know Doc also really wanted to talk about the jazz and comics essay because that was just,
that's a side conversation. Don't worry about that.
We'll just have to do it again.
But we'll just have to have you back. Once Superman and Aliens have been on the shelves for a few months, we'll bring you back to talk about that stuff. So, Phillip, is there anything else you need to plug, or anything else you want to promote?
No, usual thing. Last God 12 should be on the shelves by the time this comes out. I'm really excited about that to wrap up the whole series. And Superman is coming out. So we've got in February we have Superman Worlds of War #2 out and House of L as well. And then in March, go back to the numbered monthly titles, Superman and Alien also. So lots coming out.
Well, very much looking forward to it. PhilipKennedyJohnson.com is your website, right?
That's right. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the stuff.
Go check him out on the socials. Pick up those books. Pick up Last God issue 12, and then tell your local comic shop to put aside Superman. What number are you starting with? Or is it going to be like a reboot of a one or? No,
it actually comes back in March. Let's see, in March, Superman 29 and Action 1029 come out. And those two issues tie together. We're not tying, the issues will not bounce back and forth between the two titles, except for that first month. Like there's a 2-issue arc with Superman 29 and Action 1029. And those do tie together. It's Golden Age Part 1 and 2. And then from that point on, Superman and Action become two different stories.
All right. So a lot of adding to the pull list I foresee in my future. So next episodes, we're covering Levana Blackburn from the Lunar Chronicles, Superman Red Sun, and Black Mask. So you can check out all of our episodes on our website, capesonthecouch.com. And we are on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Capes on the Couch. Phillip, again, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure, and we definitely hope to speak to you again in the future.
Gentlemen, this is super fun. Thanks for having me on. Sorry about all the profanity.
That's quite all right.
About that.
The uncensored stuff makes the Patreon feed. Patreon.com/Capes on the Couch. You can subscribe at any level. For Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.